Hello everyone. Hopefully today's lesson will be pretty simple. I'm breaking it down into very small parts, so hopefully we can take our time to understand how properties of real numbers are going to help us. So this will help by these properties will help while using numbers to help us understand how to better do mental math. But there's a greater need for these properties when using algebra when we start really diving into algebra, because when you add variables into things, you need to understand rules and properties in order to simplify and solve things when you don't know every factor. It's easy to plug numbers into your calculators to solve for something, but when you put a variable in there that's an unknown, you can no longer do that. So you have to really understand the properties. The first property we're going to look at is the commutative property of addition. Commutative, there's no N in there. All right, look down here, commute, not commune. All right, it tells us that A plus B equals B plus A. Well, some of you might be thinking that's obvious. Again, we're not using it for the arithmetic side of things, more for a refresher to understand how we're going to use it in algebra. So think of it as traveling. Commute, right, is how you travel. So if you go from point A to point B or from point B to point A, the distance traveled is the same. All right, so commutative property changes the order. All right, from A to B or from B to A, it doesn't matter if we're adding. So commute changes the order. Same thing applies for multiplication. Commutative changes order. All right, A times B is the same as B times A. And this stuff down here, it's exactly the same because the property is the same. We're just using multiplication instead of addition in this circumstance. So there's a commutative property for both addition and multiplication. The second type of property we're going to look at is the associative property. All right, the associative property tells us that if we have a quantity A plus B and then add C to it, it's the same as saying A plus the quantity B plus C. So it allows us to switch grouping around. And again, while this may seem obvious while doing simple arithmetic, when we're using algebra, this can come in handy. So remember, associative changes the group. The way I remember it is associative is like an association, and an association is a group of people. So associative group, associative group. And just like the commutative property, the associative property of multiplication is similar to the addition. It says that the quantity A times B times the number C is equal to A times the quantity B times C. And again, associative means group. So here's some examples of how we would use it in mental math and algebra. The first one, you can read the word problem. Essentially, it's set up so that we have 775 plus 240 plus 125 is equal to, so I'm going to flip these two around. So I'm going to change the order first. Remember, order is commutative. Now look, by regrouping, look what I regrouped to. This is a little easier to do in my head. This is why understanding these properties in arithmetic can help, because it just makes mental math a little easier. So if I know I can just group these two numbers in my head, that's 9. 9 plus 240 is easier to do than 775 plus 240. Then I get 1140 for my answer. So I'm kind of using the commutative and associative property together in order to use mental math. Down below is how we might use it in algebra. If we're given the problem 5 times the quantity 3n, well, it's easier to think of it as 5 times 3 in parentheses times n, because now I can simplify the 5 times 3, which is 15, and just write 15n. The same thing if I'm adding a group 4 plus 7b, and then there's a standard $8 that I'm charging to everything. Well, it's easier just to switch this group around. So if I change the order to look like this, and then I regroup it using the associative property to look like this, I can simplify this longer equation just to be 7b plus 12. So that's kind of how these properties can come in handy. For now, you just need to be able to identify the properties and be able to start using the properties both mentally and given algebra by just understanding that you can switch the orders and grouping around when you're doing just addition or just multiplication. It does not work when you're using a mixture of operations or if you're subtracting or dividing. Make sure you do the CYU and the questions attached to this lesson.